This morning's reading is from the second book of Kings in the Old Testament. Now, when God was about to take Elijah up to heaven in a whirlwind, Elijah and Elisha were leaving from Gilgal. Elijah said to Elisha, "Please stay here, for God has sent me to Bethel." But Elisha replied, "As God lives and as your spirit lives, I won't leave you." And they went down to Bethel. Then Elijah said to him, "Please stay here, for God has sent me to the Jordan." But Elisha said, "As God lives and as your spirit lives, I won't leave you." So the two of them went on. Now 50 men from the community of the prophets came and stood some distance from them, as the two of them stood by the Jordan. Then Elijah took his cloak, rolled it up, and hit the water, and it was divided down the middle, and the two of them passed through on dry ground. And when they had crossed, Elijah said to Elisha, "Tell me what I may do for you before I am taken away from you." And Elisha replied, "May there be a double portion of your spirit in me." And Elijah said, "That is a difficult request, but if you see me when I am taken from you, this will happen for you. But if not, it will not happen." And as they were going along talking, suddenly a fiery chariot and fiery horses separated the two of them, and Elijah went up in a whirlwind into heaven. And Elisha saw this and kept crying out, my father, Israel's chariots and its cavalry." And when he could no longer see him, he grabbed his tunic and tore it into two pieces. Then he picked up Elijah's cloak that had fallen from him and went back down and stood on the bank of the Jordan. He took Elijah's cloak that had fallen from him and hit the water and cried, "Where is the sovereign one, the God of Elijah? Where is this one?" And when he hit the water, it was divided down the middle, and Elisha passed through.
Thank you, Rod. That reading is technically considered an origin story, and it has been a common form of narrating who we are, going right back even before biblical times. It's one of the oldest forms of story that we have, and it was always considered to be important. We find others, by the way, in the Bible. You read one about a month ago, the Pentecost story, which was the origin story of the Christian church. And at Christmas, we get together and we talk about Jesus' birth. Again, one of these spectacular, wonderful, wondrous stories about someone or something coming into the world. And this isn't just in our tradition, it goes in all traditions. Lao Tzu was the former of Taoism in China, and we hear that his mother saw a star rise in the heavens, and then she was pregnant for 62 years. I can always imagine her at the Friday coffee group when everyone's together and there's a new member who's, saying, "Well, I was in labor with my first daughter for 6 hours, and I was pregnant for 62 years. You think you've got problems." And of course, these stories aren't just stranded in the past. We still have origin stories. And I'm going to look at you and see how up you are in pop culture. Batman, Spider-Man, Superman, another movie coming out this year with Superman's origin story. We love these kind of stories, and I think we've loved them throughout history, and we've given them great importance and great embellishment, I must add, because they tell us of the importance of an event, or in the case of this morning's story, of an individual. They're there to describe to us not just that this individual was born or came into the world or this organization was created. They're there with great imagery. We'd say with special effects if it were produced today, with great imagery to say this person, this event, this thing is important, pay attention. And by the way, we must always remember as we read these stories that they were not meant to be history. They were meant to grab our attention and to give us one or two key factors to think about when we think about what's happened. One of the best descriptions of how these stories have been passed on was given to me by John Dominic Crossan. Some of you will remember Dom when he preached here and talked here several times a few years ago. And he said this, and there should be a slide for this somewhere. There it is. My point, once again, is not that these ancient people told literal stories, and we are now smart enough to take them symbolically, but that they told them symbolically, and we are now dumb enough to take them literally. So do keep that in mind whenever you come to one of these stories that has thunder, lightning, angels appearing, and all these other things. And this is not a video you're looking at that was taken at the time. This is a description. This is what these stories were meant to give us, a sense of wonder and awe and excitement about reading about this particular person or event in history. So let's explore this morning's symbolic story about Elijah and Elisha. Now, Elijah was a much-loved chief prophet. He was the one that they said most embodied what God wanted in the world. He was the one who was allowed to say, Ko Amar Adonai, thus says God, and you would think that that was God speaking. But he was getting old. He wasn't the young man he once was. And I'm sure people behind the scenes were saying, and what are we going to do when Elijah dies? And the story says, you're going to get on just fine because God has someone new in mind, his pupil, Elisha. And so we get the story. The two of them go through the country. And by the way, if you're noticing the verse numbers, you'll notice a lot of them are missing because this beginning part of the story where they get to a place and God said, no, I want you to go to another place. And they go there. And then I want you to go to another place. It's told over and over again with great repetition. So don't say I don't treat you well in the sermons. We drop that part out completely. And we get them down the end of the story. They come to the Jordan River. Now let's look at the Jordan River because usually our vision of the Jordan River as a huge flowing St. Lawrence, Columbia type thing is a little bit exaggerated. It's not that wide. But anyway, he came there, took off his cloak, hit the water with his cloak, and the water, just like the Red Sea before Moses, opened, and he and Elisha moved through to the other side. Wow. And then, knowing that his master was getting to be old, Elisha said, sir, you know, I'd like you to give me your power when you die. And then, and this is the part that always bothered me as a kid, he said, I want to get a double portion of your power. What a grotty little man. You know, how pushy. You know, I'm going to get twice your power. Ha, ha, ha. No, this is Jewish law. And every Jewish person reading this story or hearing this story would have immediately said, we know what's going on. The oldest person to inherit from an estate, usually the oldest son, it was a patriarchy, the oldest son got a double portion of all the other people. This is not favoritism. This is not, I like you more than the others. This is saying that if you have a family with 13 children and you split it up in 13 different ways, no one's going to get anything and you're going to starve. So you want one person at least to have enough to carry on with the farm and the farming and give everybody else a livelihood. So he was really asking for the law of inheritance. And we know this because in the story, remember when Elijah is going up in heaven, he cries, Father, Father, you're my father. Please, give me the power that you promised you'd give me. And that's what happened. They're walking along. The chariot of God, fiery horses, fiery vehicle, picks Elijah up and takes him into the sky. He died. That's what And then Elisha wonders, did I get any power? Picks up the robe, whacks the Jordan, and it opens and he moves on. What a great story. Aren't you glad it was told that way, rather than 2 lines saying, and Elijah grew old and died and Elisha took over? That's not a good story. This is a good story, and this is what we have. And what we remember from it is that we all get an inheritance. We all have a heritage. We have received from our parents, our community, our country, our world, so much. Not just material things, but the way we see the world, the way we act, the way we behave, what we expect. All of these things have to a great degree not been created by us. They come to us and bless us and give us our lives, give us how we live and what we desire and how we react with other people. And what the story says first is, yes, Elisha did get an inheritance. And by the way, when we talk about someone passing their mantle as a sign of handing over power or authority, giving over the office keys or the executive washroom keys or whatever, when we talk about that, we often say he's passing the mantle. This is where that phrase comes from. So we've all received a heritage. And the real question of our lives, what we're reflecting on today is, okay, first, let's identify what we've received. That's a good thing to do. But then, how have we used that? How have we used our gifts, our money, our influence, our education, our dreams? How have we used these things? Have we used them properly? And do we really understand the expanse of the inheritance that God has provided for us? I think it's a very appropriate discussion on the week of Canada Day. Because, we as Canadians, as a group, everyone in this room, have received so much from this country. And often, we're so busy complaining about what we don't have or didn't get, both on a personal and a community level, that we forget just what we have got. A few weeks ago, my wife and I were down at Waterson and talked with some of the Kainai people down there. And what always hits me when I'm speaking in that sort of company is the great respect that the Indigenous people that Graham mentioned earlier have for this land. Great respect for what has happened. Great respect for what they receive from the earth and the water and the skies. We're more of the, let's pave paradise and put up a parking lot type people. That's sort of where we are. And so it is good to spend some time asking, what have I done with what God has given me? It's a very important question. In fact, next week, so those of you coming back here, when you come in that door next week, I want you to think of the hymn we sang this morning, Great is Thy Faithfulness, and ask yourself, how has God been faithful, generous, supportive of me in the past week? Not what went wrong or what did I do that I shouldn't have done. No, leave that and just say, how has God touched me in a creative and a sustaining way over the last 7 days? What good things have I got? And you see, when we begin to see life in that way, it gets rid of a lot of the negativity and the feeling we're bogged down by the things we don't have, or I only wish this had been done or that had happened. No, God provides day by day by day. Now, heritage is good. We should remember who we are and why we are and whose we are. But at the same time, heritage can trap us, can hold us, can keep us in a place where perhaps we don't want to be, doing things we don't like to do, and yet feeling we must do it because this is my lot in life. Look at me, I have to do this, I have to take care of that, I have to do something else. No, God's heritage is meant to make our lives better, not to drag us down. Karen Armstrong spoke at a conference that some of us in Knox attended a number of years ago now, and she had this to say. A Buddhist teacher was walking with his disciples, and he said, "My teaching is like a raft built to cross the water. One does not carry it with one after one has arrived on the other shore. So with my teaching. If it helps, use it. If not, leave it behind." And sometimes we're so reticent to do that. Let's start with things. I'm not going to ask this question. You should all just put up your hands. It would be boring. How many of you have things around the house that are just traditional because they've always been there and they were left to you by your great Aunt Myrtle and you can't bear to put them out? It's ugly. It's useless. It's been in the cupboard for 30 years, but it's my heritage. Because that's the kind of heritage we don't need to take with us. You can remember it. Yep, I used to have that ugly vase that Aunt Myrtle gave me, but you don't need it to move into the future. But more importantly, I think of the non-material things, the habits we pick up. I've always done this, or I've always thought that. I've always been a believer that, and to leave that position behind, it might be the best thing in the world, but it's the way I was brought up, it's the way my family always thought, or ways you've done things. We've always celebrated Canada Day by going to Princess Island Park. This year, some of the family don't want to go. What horrible people they are. Maybe it's time to do something else. The world doesn't fall apart. What you're doing is, of course, building a new heritage. Doing new things. That's what we're called upon to do, is to grow. And to grow, you've got to put down some things. You can't carry everything into the future with you. This, haven't used in 20 years. That was a great theory when I was 12, but I don't think it matters now. And then we can move off into the future and find new things, new ideas, new hopes. Even explore talents that we've always known we have, but have never used. Someday, I'm going to pick up my joy I always feel whenever I try to draw something, and I'm going to become a painter or a sketcher or a cartoonist or something. Someday, but it's not now. No. You're making a new heritage with every decision you make, with everything you do. Mark Manson said, "The fact is, people who base their self-worth on being right about everything," like Donald Trump, he didn't say that, prevent themselves from learning from their mistakes. See, if you go through life thinking, I've got everything I need, I know what life is about, I know what I should be doing, I've always done things this way, I've always expected to do things this way, if you go through life, you're never growing. You're never examining, yeah, I've always done things that way, but was that the best way? I've always carried out that, but do I need to keep doing that? Yes, I hold on to it in my heritage is good and life-giving, and I set aside the rest. The story ends, and probably the most important part of the story is the last couple of verses, because it's got wonderful symbolism. If you want to look at your life, look at the last couple of verses we read this morning. Elisha is now all alone. Elijah has disappeared in the fiery chariot up in the sky somewhere. He picks up the authority, the cloak, picks up the past. Well, first he tears his cloak. There's another symbol I just thought of. He tore his cloak, his old self, the clothes he normally wore. If you want to feel different, wear something different tomorrow. Come out with a completely different look. Look at Graham and I today. Aren't we better looking than you've ever seen us before? We did something new. By the way, we wore this, and actually I had a tunic underneath, 52 weeks a year. It is 82 degrees in here right now. It's terrible. Anyway, dress differently. So that's what he did. He tore up his old way of dressing, of being. He put on a new cloak, a new way, a new identity, a new sense of who he was. And then he whacked the river, and it opened, and he crossed. And you notice what's happening here. They just came from there. Elijah had parted the water, and they came over here. And now he's going back. Well, he's not backtracking. He's just setting off in a new direction. Yeah, Elijah liked to do that. That's where he was going. Those were his plans. That's where he felt God was taking him. Now I'm looking at me. And who I am, where God is taking me. open the river and go through. Heritage is a strangely past, present, and future word. It talks primarily about what we've received, which we reflect upon and give thanks for. This is what's brought me this far. Don't need this, don't need that. I'm crossing the Jordan. I'm going somewhere new. I'm discovering who I am in some new way, with some new vision. What is your heritage? What do you celebrate about it today? And where are you headed with it into the future? And for that kind of reflection, thanks be to God.